Spurs win 1-0 against Everton yesterday, but that is not at all the biggest news of what happened. I think for the first time in London's finest history, we're going to start our show west of the Atlantic Ocean, right here in America, and we've got a tournament to talk about because not necessarily are we previewing it, because at this point there might not be much left to preview. At the point of recording this, obviously this is going to stream a few hours in advance, so things may be completely different. At the time of recording, Carlos Vela has just announced he's not going to participate in the MLS's back tournament. FC Dallas has announced that they will not be participating in the MLS's back tournament. Orlando and Portland have delayed not Orlando, excuse me, Portland and maybe Nashville, one other team, have decided that they are going to delay their flights down to Orlando in fear of presumptive COVID-19 cases within their team roster and within their team personnel. A whole bunch of stuff happening right on the eve of this tournament getting underway. This was supposed to kick off Wednesday night right here in America, down in Walt Disney World, and we may not even see any MLS football at all for the foreseeable future. Gentlemen, we're going to try to tiptoe our way around this topic because we have no idea where this is going to go in 24 hours. We have no idea how different it may be by the time 3 p.m. rolls around on Tuesday, because we may be talking about something that's 10 miles in the rear view based off of how quickly all this is developing. But let's, for now, assume that this tournament will continue, whether it's as scheduled or a little bit delayed. Players like Carlos Vela, teams like FC Dallas, stepping out and backing out of this tournament, does that negatively impact the legitimacy of this tournament, of this title, or do you just kind of draw it up as you roll with the punches, you can only play who you play, and the winner should still get the credit?
The first thing that I want to say about this –
Lot to unpack, I know.
Yeah, lot to unpack. The Carlos Vela news, and this is not Carlos Vela saying, I don't want to play football, I don't want to represent my club. He's looking out for his family. In his statement, he said that his wife had a newborn baby and he doesn't want to take the chance of bringing anything back to them. So in situations like that, you have to respect it because you're going to a place in Florida who this past weekend on Saturday, over 11,000 cases and about 10,000 on Sunday of this past weekend, which is just ridiculous astronomical numbers in general, not the fact that this has been going on since, I believe, the middle of March, which is just obscene in its own right. And they're going into a firing line of coronavirus right now in Florida. So all credit to the people who see both sides of it and decide to put their family first. Can't say anything negative about that decision. But in terms of football, I think of course it does. And this is valid for every other sport where you have in the NBA, you have players not necessarily of a high magnitude yet, but you have players opting out of that. You have players in Major League Baseball in America opting out of that. You have players in leagues that are deciding not to play because they don't want to go along with that. They don't want to take the risk health-wise to put their family in danger, which is certainly admirable. But it definitely affects the quality of the competition, especially when you take a front runner for MLS MVP, one of the best players that the MLS has honestly ever seen in an age where he can still do real damage, not able to play in a marquee event to get the league back on track. It's huge. And I can't say enough that I don't fault Carlos Vela for his decision, but it definitely adds more than an asterisk into what's happening because Carlos Vela is in a situation right now where he's not playing, and LAFC is in a situation where the MLS isn't necessarily treating this like the NBA playoffs or the NHL playoffs or any other sports where those playoffs determine a real champion, where this is just tournament football. So it's not necessarily indicative of an entire season's work, but it still matters and it still has a huge impact.
Yeah, this is obviously a negative impact for the MLS because not only is it, if it was just a random player of some sorts, then it really wouldn't be that big of a deal. Although we're seeing, sort of random veteran players in the MLB opting out, and it's still a pretty big deal because they're names that, diehard baseball fans know. So I'm sure, if a random player in the MLS, diehard MLS fans know, and they're saying, oh, he's not out. But this is the reigning MVP of the league saying, I'm not going to do this. And obviously the MLS coming back, you want your best players on the pitch out there. You want to get the ratings up there. And to do that, your best players are out there making moves and putting on a show. And Carlos Vela not being there is definitely going to hurt the MLS. But now that FC Dallas is taken out, an entire squad is dropping out of this tournament. That just puts the entire thing into perspective here. And it's the MLS is teetering on dangerous territory right now because if they continue with this tournament, which is supposed to go on tomorrow, it's supposed to start tomorrow, when we're dropping this on Tuesday. It's tough, and they got to go back to the drawing board now and say, really look into it and dig deep and say, listen, is this really worth it? After you have an entire squad drop out and probably our best player in the entire league dropping out, it's dangerous territory, like I said. And Will said something eerily, that really resonated with me and him when we were covering some conference basketball in America here. He said that the night before everything shut down, this is what happened. Teams started dropping out and leagues started shutting down. And then the next day, everything shut down. That's when the world of sports stopped. So we're so close to getting sports back here in America. UFC has been going, boxing's coming back, but now these big leagues, they have their plans set. They're ready to get going. And now we're so close. The MLS was the first one that's supposed to come back, at least on the male side, obviously with the NWSL going on right now with the Challenge Cup. But the MLS was the first male sport that's supposed to come back starting tomorrow. And now we may not have it because things like this are going on and numbers are starting to skyrocket. Obviously, when they chose Florida, and this goes to the NBA as well, when they chose Florida, the numbers were starting to go down. And as a country, we were feeling pretty good. But now they've completely spiked back up, at least in Florida, where they're going to be. And that just spells trouble. And obviously it does, because you have 9 guys on FC Dallas testing positive. You have 5 players on Nashville testing positive. So it's tough, and they got to go back to the drawing board and make a decision quick, because, like we said, this tournament's supposed to start tomorrow. But it's a tough line to tread on. If they continue to go with it, they're going to get a lot of shit if they continue to go on with this tournament after an entire squad pulls out.
Yeah, no, it's tough. I don't envy being in the MLS's position right now. I think that's something that I'm totally fine with them handling and not me. But still, just from a bird's eye view, taking a look at yesterday's news and everything that unfolded, it really is hard to make a case for the winner of this tournament receiving the accolades and the praise that they would have had FC Dallas been playing and had Carlos Vela been playing. I mean, a part of me wants to make the argument that if this tournament happens, before I get into anything else, let the record show that I don't think this tournament should happen based off what happened and has happened in the past 24 hours. If this tournament does resume, and if MLS does say play on, a part of me wants to make the argument that whoever wins the MLS's back tournament deserves more praise than they would have otherwise, and they deserve more accolades than they would have otherwise, because it would almost feel as if you won the tournament in spite of everything that happened. But then there's the conversation of the morality of the tournament even happening, and well, maybe you played LAFC without even needing to, or you ran into an LAFC team without the Carlos Vela, an MVP frontrunner. So from the play standpoint, it definitely throws a wrench in things. But Andrew, you said it. I mean, I saw that FC Dallas pulled out of the tournament literally 10 minutes before we started recording the show. And the first feeling I got was back when we were both covering college basketball, and we saw that the Thunder Jazz, I believe it was Thunder and Jazz.
Yes.
Who?
Yeah, well, you're right.
Yeah, okay, Thunder and Jazz, yeah. That they had taken the teams off, and then 10 minutes later we heard that there were teams dropping out of the ECAC hockey tournament left and right, and then everything within 12 hours just came to a screeching halt. So it feels painfully similar to that. As weird as it is to say, I get goosebumps thinking about it. Like, that's how weird everything is right now. Obviously, it's different in Europe if you're watching our show from somewhere other than the U.S. because your sport leagues are back. Or what?
Or listening.
Or I keep forgetting our audio only viewers. But if you're living in Great Britain or in France or Germany or somewhere else, I mean, your stuff is back. You've got Bundesliga back, you've got Premier League back, you've got racing back, you've got all this stuff is resumed, and albeit it's weird, but you don't have to deal with potentially these things coming to a stop again, because it feels as if all of those leagues are full speed ahead. Here, I mean, we've got the MLS, and like you said, Andrew, the MLS is not the first league back in America. We've got other programs, like you said, UFC is back, NASCAR is back, the NWSL is back, which should not be taken lightly or for granted. But the MLS is certainly, from a commercial standpoint, the biggest league to come back, and the most widely known league to come back, and the most difficult to coordinate league to come back. And it's within the past 24 hours, it's almost gone down in flames. It's stunning. Let's take a step back and let's just look at American sports as a whole, because MLS is, to an extent, the test rat, the test subject for American sports coming back, because they were the first. Next is, I believe, NBA, and then potentially MLB. What does this mean for those leagues? Because we're seeing the MLS try to get a plan in place, and the MLS did it the way that everybody recommended you to do it, inside a bubble at one neutral location with all of your teams there without the ability to escape. I mean, we know the MLB is not doing that. The MLB is enabling travel. The NBA is going to be playing inside a bubble, but the MLS did it in maybe the objectively safest way possible, and it's still not working out for them. So what does this mean for other leagues within the USA's borders?
Well, here's a perfect example from the MLS that shows exactly the biggest problem that all these leagues are going to have. You look at FC Dallas, we referenced that they dropped out. You know why they dropped out, for those of you who don't know the numbers?
Like
14 total cases of the coronavirus on their team. That is 13 players and 1 staff member. Think about it. 14 players, that's an entire NBA team roster. That's basically all of your lines in hockey. And imagine that happens while your season is underway. You can't have the Los Angeles Lakers drop out of the NBA playoffs if they all get coronavirus. That's an even bigger asterisk. Asterisk is the hardest word to say in the English language. That is an even bigger bubble that you could put on the whole league than anything else. And as crazy as it is, it's fortunate for the MLS that FC Dallas dropped out of the tournament because of the coronavirus before it even started, because that is a logistical mess if that happens. So this is what leagues have to look for, and I'm sure all of them have contingency plans in there for what happens if teams have to drop out or do this or do that. But the problem is, once a team drops out of this is probably the least consequential thing you can drop out of, because yes, you can get that CONCACAF Champions League spot and some prize money. Outside of that, it means nothing. You can't just drop out of the NBA playoffs. You can't just drop out of a baseball season. That is impossible to do, and that is something that won't happen because of the money that you need to generate. But this is the perfect example. I have no idea what the future is going to be. People are going to press on and play because the money's there and the money has to be made. And we know that money reigns supreme in athletics at all levels, which is the sad reality of it. But you look at this FC Dallas situation, it should be correlated to every single sport and every single professional league in America coming back, because there's going to be a problem if multiple players catch it, especially if you have star players that catch it and have to drop out. Carlos Vela did not contract coronavirus, but he's not going. If Mike Trout doesn't play baseball, and we talked about Mike Trout on this show a few months ago as a joke for those people who've been listening for so long, but when your better players start dropping out because of family safety or because they contract the virus, and then you have teams dropping out, that's something that you can plan for, but once it happens, you're just not ready for it anyway.
Yeah, this is showing you how real this thing is, because I mean, these guys are professional athletes.
They should have already, though.
Yeah, this is true. But you know, for sports fans who have been dying to get sports back at any cost, it's just showing you that, you know, these guys are human too. These are some of the most athletic people, most in shape people on the face of the earth, and they're pulling out because they don't want to get it or because they do have it. It's showing you that, you know, everybody is vulnerable to this thing, and it is real. And it sucks because, like I said, we were ever so close to getting sports back, and nothing has been canceled yet. But you would think that the MLS is probably going to axe this tournament. I talked about it with you guys off camera with the MLB. Their schedule was released last night, and I don't think they're going to play. They're supposed to start in 2 weeks. I don't think they're going to play because their first round of tests, they only got 38 of like 3,000, but their second round of tests, they haven't gotten it back yet, and it's been 4 days. So the players are getting worried. Teams are canceling workouts. If that next test comes back and it's up to like 300, 400 people, heads are going to start to turn and say, what the hell is going on here? I don't know if this is such a great idea. And like Banks said, sports are a business. It's all about the money. And clearly these leagues are dying right now because they haven't played in 4 months, and they're trying to get back to it and get any type of money they can get. But at the end of the day, you got to take a step back and say, listen, I don't know if it's worth it. And it may have long-term effects on these leagues, and it probably will have long-term effects on these leagues. But you got to put a human perspective on it and say, listen, it's not worth it if, you know, our top players and our top teams are pulling out of stuff like this. If Mike Trout doesn't play in the MLB, that's going to do – it's going to be terrible for the MLB if they continue to push on and play. And I'm not saying it comes down to a star player in the league like Carlos Vela saying I'm not going to play, in the league's like, okay, our best player's not playing, so we're not going to do it. That's not the case. But when you don't have your stars out there, you don't have your best players, you know, putting out a product for you guys, it's going to hurt you regardless of how much time you're putting into these, you know, returns. So I don't know what the future holds. We'll find out more tomorrow, I guess, because the MLS, like we said, it starts tomorrow. It's supposed to start tomorrow, and they're going to have to put out a statement of some sort with the FC Dallas pulling out. But it's a scary thing. I feel like it's unfortunate, but I feel like we're back in March when this whole thing started with sports dying, because it feels like we're kind of getting down to that same path again.
All I will say is if the MLS's plan isn't working, then there's no way in hell that any other plan will work, because the MLS had maybe the best plan of the group to fly everybody in after a COVID-19 test to make sure that they were healthy and safe, to fly them into a bubble and have them not be able to get out of it until the tournament is over and they again test negative for coronavirus. If that doesn't work, then I don't know what will. Sad as it is to say. Last question, boys. We're going to sum everything up in a few sentences. Does this tournament need to be canceled?
The short answer, yeah, I think it does, to be really honest. When you have an entire squad pulling out, and even if they didn't pull out, half their team tested positive for it, so they couldn't even play if they didn't decide to pull out. They couldn't play for the first 2 weeks. It's just I don't think it's worth it. It sucks, obviously, and a lot more money is going to be lost for the MLS, but it's the right thing to do, because I'm sure players on other teams and staff members on other teams are stepping back and saying, whoa, like maybe this really isn't worth it.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree. First of all credit to the people who organized this, because they really created a best case scenario for Major League Soccer. Couldn't foresee what was coming. I mean, you could based on the actions of other people, but that's a different discussion. But yeah, it has to get canceled to look out for the safety of everyone. If the trend that it's going on is continuing, obviously, if we see a dramatic turn of events in the next few days / week, then you could possibly start it later. But the way the trends are going, that just doesn't seem likely, as sad as it is to say, because it's just disappointing for everyone who is following social guidelines and doing their part to really get this thing going. But it's not looking good for the MLS's back tournament, that's for sure.
Yeah, there we go. Up until 24 hours ago, the MLS's back tournament looked like a sure go, looked like it was ready to rock. And since then, it has fallen into serious jeopardy. Uncertain what will happen with the tournament, if it happens at all, with players and, like these guys mentioned, entire teams pulling out of the competition. It's supposed to kick off Wednesday night. We don't know if that'll happen. Most likely it won't, regardless of whether or not the tournament get canceled. But the three of us all seem to be in unison in saying that it's probably better off if this tournament doesn't happen. No need to force it. The only argument that I can make, and it's not even a good one, from the MLS perspective, is this is that time window that you have to be at the center, because the other leagues aren't starting for a while anyway. But what's the point of doing that if it's incredibly immoral to send your players to a tournament that they don't necessarily want to be at? I don't know if you guys heard the Bob Bradley quote from a couple hours ago, but basically he was asked what he thought of this whole tournament style and the process, and he goes, well, when they presented it to us, we didn't have much of a choice anyway, which I think says everything in this instance. Maybe not the best idea to have this tournament push onward, especially if the only press you're going to receive from it will be negative from both outside of your organization and from your own players and coaches. Interesting stuff, though. As this story develops, you can guarantee that we will be talking about it right here on London's Finest. It's probably a topic we're going to be talking about for the foreseeable future, because I tend to doubt that this is the last major development in regards to the MLS's back tournament.